you're looking at the most dangerous racetrack in America. At over 12 miles long, this course climbs through the Rocky Mountains up to the summit of Colorado's legendary Pikes Peak, 14,115 feet above sea level. Which starts as a simple road course on a public highway any old person can drive on, turns into a dangerous trek above the clouds for the final leg to the finish line. On a mountaintop road with an average speed limit of 25 miles per hour, competitors tear down the track at 140 with no braking markers, turn indicators, or frame of reference for where they even are. Just sky in front of them and 2,000-foot drop-offs mere feet to their right. One wrong move and one could easily go over the edge.
Oh my God!
It's this top section of the course that makes the historic Pikes Peak Hill Climb so dangerous. The first Pikes Peak Hill Climb was held in 1916, promoted by famous entrepreneur Spencer Penrose. Since then, the hill climb has evolved into an international competition featuring some of the most incredible race cars and superbikes ever built. Drivers and motorcyclists compete one by one for the best possible time to the top of the gigantic mountain. And a highway that takes the average person 1 to 3 hours to drive gets covered by these professionals in around 10 minutes. But Pikes Peak hasn't gone without seeing its fair share of tragedy. In 2019, the race's organizers suspended the climb's motorcycle division following the death of four-time winner Carlin Dunn in a crash near the finish line. But what makes the final few miles of the course one of the most death-defying challenges around can be summarized by 4 things: the amount of unprotected blind turns, unstable road conditions, enormous altitude, and an unpredictable environment.
For me, I think the most difficult part of the road was the entire top section. You're well above tree line at that point, so it's really intimidating visually just because there's barren cliffs everywhere you look.
That's Tommy Boylo, a professional race car driver who competed in his first Pikes Peak Hill Climb in 2019, when he was awarded the race's Rookie of the Year prize. We spoke with him, as well as IndyCar driver and Pikes Peak veteran J.R. Hildebrand, about just what makes driving on top of this mountain so dangerous. To start with, there's the absurd amount of blind corners, 156 to be exact, throughout the entire Pikes Peak racecourse. But the most terrifying ones can be found at the top.
It is incredibly dangerous. I mean, there's no guardrails, and the majority of the corners, the speeds are incredibly high.
Unlike a typical track, the majority of turns lack barricades. One mistake at a hairpin bend can send you hurling over the edge thousands of feet, like driver Jeremy Foley in 2012 when his car lost grip of the road. Miraculously, Foley and his co-pilot, Yuri Kuznetsov, both walked away from one of the race's worst crashes in recent history.
There are other forms of motorsport that have similar, maybe it's trees off the side of a stage rally or, a water hazard or something like that. Even driving at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway where maybe we're going to get it, I might hit the wall at 200 miles an hour. But this is very much like in your face that there's only one thing is going to happen if you go off track, and it's not good.
You have to learn the road. You have to memorize all 156 corners. There's some corners that look very, very similar, where sometimes you're coming into a corner at top of 4th gear and got to carry 120 miles an hour on exit, or there's another corner that looks almost identical, but you have to slow down to a 1st gear hairpin on exit.
Just memorizing the circuit and being familiar with it initially is one of the most difficult things to do, and I think is as difficult to do there as it is anywhere in the world. Coming from a road racing background, you don't have any of those kinds of markers, sight lines that you're used to. You don't have braking points. There's nothing that's kind of telling you what's coming up or how close you are to the next corner or any of those kinds of things.
Then there's the change in altitude. Pikes Peak stands at a height of 14,115 feet. That's equivalent to the length of almost 39 football fields. For anyone whose body isn't acclimated to the elevation, altitudes this high have very noticeable effects on the human body because of the intense decrease in oxygen levels. These effects can range from simply poor athletic performance to dizziness and dehydration. But for motorsport athletes, even the vehicle can be affected that high up.
You are combating this element of altitude. So not only is the car working differently at the top than it does at the bottom, it's not making as much horsepower, but the tires are kind of smoked from having gone through this whole run up the hill. The aerodynamics aren't working as well because the air is less dense, but also physically you're experiencing this dramatic change in altitude over the course of the event. I mean, you're ending at 14,000 feet, which feels like, maybe you've had a couple of beers when you get to the top just from kind of it being so high up.
I am kind of fortunate being local here. I grew up in Colorado, so I'm used to the elevation, so my blood oxygen saturation is much higher than most other drivers. You get a lot of drivers that come in from different countries and states, and they tend to struggle with the elevation a little bit. So that in itself is a bit of a risk, just because your body takes time to adapt. Just to kind of eliminate any excuse or any errors that we could have, I did run an oxygen bottle inside of the car, which is really common. The majority of the guys, especially the front running guys, we all run oxygen inside of the car directly into our helmets.
Drivers at the top of Pikes Peak are also in danger of unpredictable road conditions that don't compare to what racers find on your average circuit. The highway is regularly hit by rough weather, but doesn't receive the same treatment that other streets or professional tracks do to ensure safety. The freezing temperatures at the top of the mountain don't help either.
The road itself isn't maintained the same way that a proper racetrack would be. There's no street sweepers going out there to make sure there's no gravel. Being a 14,000 foot tall mountain, you get a lot of snow and water that runs across the road in different places and things like that. But also up that high in the elevation, the road tends to warp a lot through the freeze-thaw process throughout the winter. So even during race week, there would be a bump that would develop in one corner that wasn't there the day before.
Even changes to the road expected to make it more safe didn't help at all. In 1998, environmental organization the Sierra Club sued the city of Colorado Springs, alleging that gravel erosion from Pikes Peak Highway caused water pollution. The city was forced to pave the entire dirt and gravel highway, something that would only make the historic race event even more dangerous.
People think that driving on the gravel is more dangerous, but in reality, the speeds are much lower if you're driving on that dirt surface. And effectively, the racetrack itself is wider. So by getting that pavement placed all the way from top to bottom, the speeds went drastically higher throughout the entire course of the run.
As we think about it in kind of motorsports terms, you're pulling more G's through the corners because it's paved, the cars have more grip. You might be in more control doing that, but because you're generating more load, a little mistake can really, move you off the track by a lot more.
And from the weather to the environment, all bets are off at the top of Pikes Peak when you're driving through the Rocky Mountain wilderness. This means storms at the top of the mountain that roll in at a moment's notice on race day. And in some extreme situations, unpredicted encounters with wildlife.
I went down to Pikes Peak last year to hang out with Travis Pastrana, and on his run, he got up kind of to where a tree line breaks, so you're talking 11,000 feet or something. Started pouring rain for 8 corners going through these W's going up the hill, and then he got above that and it was clear again. So then he kind of gets back on it, and then he came through a blind corner and there were mountain goats all over the road. And so that's just, you hear crazy stories like that all across the board from people.
But despite so many life-threatening hazards that come with driving a race course like Pikes Peak, professional drivers continue returning, and the number of entries keeps increasing. It's an eye-opening, once-in-a-lifetime experience for those who partake, even the spectators. The race is incomparable to that of any in the world, and the level of danger can't be found on any other American race course. But with so much history behind the race, the esteem that comes with being crowned king of the mountain, and the adrenaline rush that comes from driving on the edge of certain death, to drivers this competitive and in love with the sport of racing, the rewards far outweigh the risk.